Every retailer says they're investing in shelf intelligence, cameras, smart shelves, ESLs, computer vision.
But IHL just dropped a number that should make every retail CIO, COO, and CFO very uncomfortable. Only 9.1% of retailers have current computer vision deployed. The hardware is everywhere. The intelligence isn't.
In this episode of Data Blades, Greg Buzek of IHL joins us to explain the whole tech stack, RFID, smart shelves, cameras, plus why the network underneath the shelf is the thing nobody's really talking about and why it may be the only thing that matters. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 7, Retail Data Junkies. This is the Retail Razor Data Blades, the podcast that slices through complex retail research to bring you sharp, actionable insights you can use today. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. Today, we're kicking off a new 3-part AI in Retail series. We're super excited about this. We're partnering with the team at IHL Group on 3 episodes built around 2026 Retail Transformation Study, How Retail Leaders Outperform, which, if you weren't aware, is the largest annual survey of retail technology leaders in the industry.
And to take us through the data, we've got one of the most respected analysts in the space and good friend of the show, Greg Buzek, President, Founder, and Chief AI Orchestrator of IHL Group.
In today's episode, we're talking about shelf intelligence, cameras, ESLs, computer vision, smart shelves, the technologies that have been on every retailer's investment list for 3 years.
And here's the wrinkle in the data, though. Every retailer says they want this stack, but almost none have built the tech stack underneath to actually run it. Only 9.1% have current computer vision, and only 12.2% have current ESLs. So today, we're digging into why that gap exists and what it's costing the retailers who don't close it. But before we dive in, let me tell you about our Retail Razor Podcast Network sponsor, Retail Club. Join 2,000 retail leaders at the Retail Club AI Festival, September 22nd to 24 in Huntington Beach. Dive deep into how AI is reshaping retail while soaking up the sun at a fully outdoor beachside venue. Decision makers from retailers and brands can attend with free tickets and up to $1,250 in travel reimbursement. Head to retailclub.com/retail-razor-podcast to learn more and get your ticket today. Thank you, Retail Club, for helping us bring you this podcast and all the podcasts in the Retail Razor Podcast Network.
Now, we also have a quick favor to ask you, our audience. If you enjoy the show, hit us with a 5-star rating and review. Please drop those short reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you're listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode.
And check out the other shows in the Retail Razor Podcast Network, the Retail Razor Show, the OG, Retail Transformers, and Blade to Greatness. You'll find them all in your favorite podcast app and our YouTube channel.
Now let's kick off part 1 of this 3-part series and welcome Greg Buzek, President and Founder of IHL Group, to the show.
Welcome to the Retail Razor Data Blades Show, Greg. We're excited to kick off this 3-part series with you, dig into so many of the AI and retail insights that you and IHL team have been gathering, analyzing for months or almost a year or two now. It's just about, but you've been really digging into this data. It's kind of hard for me to believe it's taken us this long to get you on the show and to have this discussion.
It's really surprising.
I know, after it's like this is made for you, the work you're doing.
Yeah, data blades for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So some of our Retail Razor Show fans may remember you from previous episodes where a completely different topic. We were talking about retail ROI and all the great work helping children around the world happening there. But today we're really diving in on the data around AI in retail. It's great to have you here, Greg.
Yeah, well, hey, it's great to be with you, Ricardo and Casey. Hey, just real quick, one retail ROI thing that's going to be exciting is literally this week we will send out our grant that surpasses $6 million total for the organization through Saturday, and people come into that. So we're real excited about it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Congratulations.
That is fantastic. Excellent.
And what a great way to kick off this AI in retail series by talking about a topic that is getting more and more attention these days as store ops moves to a mode where everything is booming data-led and data-centric, an area where retail tech investment is having a massive impact. And of course, we're talking about shelf intelligence. And you've got a recently published study, your 2026 retail transformation study, that we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah, the study, we looked at over 400 brands through interviews there, and shelf intelligence was a big part of that. Not only do we have that as part of the core study, how winners outperform, how retail leaders outperform, but we actually have separate shelf intelligence reports that breaks this down into great detail just for this as well.
Oh, fantastic. So let's dive into this series. This is part one. And let's really talk about what's happening with shelf intelligence in stores. So, Greg, what does it actually mean for a retail store in 2026 to be implementing and deploying shelf intelligence? What does that tech stack actually look like?
Well, shelf intelligence, traditionally, it's just been the manager walking around and looking what's empty, sort of thing. However, particularly in the last several years with COVID in particular, and then launching into everything from tariffs to wars and other things, we've had all these disruptions that have occurred in the supply chain. And really, when you add to that the level of theft that has been happening at stores in certain regions, just knowing what you have on the shelf has become all the more critical, as well as the rise in alternate channels than just walking in the store and picking something off the shelf. When you're fulfilling from the store for a local delivery or buy online and pick up in store, or ship from the warehouse there, or even ship store to store, you need to know what you got. And you need to know when those trucks are coming in. So shelf intelligence has become all the more important in terms of profitability. And some of the tools now are necessary because, like I said, the rise and shrink, you think you have it, but you don't really know that you have it unless you're able to verify that. And so you can lose a lot of time and a lot of margin with labor walking around a store trying to find something that's supposed to be there.
So what are some of the different tools you're seeing now that you're finding from recent studies that retailers are putting into stores that are helping them win this battle?
Yeah, it's a variety of different technologies. The most consistent technologies are computer vision and RFID that we're seeing, as well as electronic shelf labels that help with the pricing side of the equation. But then we're now seeing autonomous robots that are being used, and all of that requires increased networking and bandwidth. So there's like a level at which you do all these things where you've got to have the compute at the store level in most cases to sort through the data because the amount of data that's being processed. But then you got to have the network that can support that as well, both in the local LAN as well as the WAN for things there. And everybody's got a different view. I mean, there are robots that go up and down stores where they process all that video and all that data in the robot itself. There are others that do it on the edge. And so they're pumping that over the local network to process. And then there are others that are doing it in the cloud, which is the most network intense. So those are some of the different technologies that are being deployed. And each situation is a little bit different. One that's becoming more and more controversial right now is electronic shelf labels. It's funny, during COVID, when you couldn't get people to work there at the stores, the unions didn't push back at shelf labels. And after 20 years of holding electronic shelf labels back, they didn't push back on that. And so all these retailers have deployed them, and they have them now, and that allows them to do price changes as necessary. Any retailer I know is doing price changes in the evening. They're just not pumping them down in real time there. But the unions are now pushing back on those technology, saying, oh, they're just changing it during the day or customer to customer type of thing. And so that's the one that's got some controversy to it. RFID is another one of those technologies that for 25 years started to grow. But once COVID happened and we went to this proliferation of journeys for customers, knowing what you have and where it is specifically in the store became all the more important. And that is one of the most telling from a financial return technologies that we've seen, particularly for all those other journeys that have a store fulfillment process to them, because knowing where it is and how, and specifically that size 8 dress is sitting in a dressing room rather than on a shelf, and you're shipping it from your store, all the margin's gone. If you can't find it, it's not on the rack and you're just walking around. You just paid somebody for an hour's worth of work that should have taken 3 minutes. And the end result of that is you don't have it. Even further, knowing you actually have it in the store when the transaction is occurring is all the more important as well.
I don't know how many times, I couldn't possibly count, that I've offered to go in the back stock room of a shoe department to look for the last pair.
There you go.
They won't let me.
Yeah, it's really fun. That is one of the areas where RFID and even visual camera handheld intelligence is great, because RFID can say, hey, it's right here. But you can actually hold up a camera, scan it. It's got an engine where you just hold up the camera and they say, oh, it's that box right over there, that specific box that it's looking for the shoes. Macy's was like one of the first ones to deploy RFID in that back room for shoes. And I think they saw close to 50% uptick.
Wow.
In sales.
Got it. They were a terrible offender on my end.
Yeah, exactly. So they knew where that was. And they were one of the first ones to deploy RFID at this level, but it's gone down all the way, Walmart now down to items under $1 that they're tagging with RFID tags, because you, like I said, you're fulfilling from store stock. You need to know where that stuff is at all times.
Yeah, you got to know the whole accurate inventory. Yeah. How much of what you're seeing here is based on computer vision versus RFID, or are you starting to see a combination of the two in the best cases?
Yeah, RFID is more popular. It's still relatively low overall. It's about 20% of retailers overall that are running RFID today. You see it more in fashion, and in fashion, you actually see it through checkout as well. So you've got Uniqlo and Zara and others doing the RFID checkout. The beauty of that is you don't have as much interference with RFID in that environment. And when you were dealing with color and size, knowing which specific item you have is all the more important, and where that is in the store. You're seeing it more now, though, in the mass merchants and the consumer packaged goods. This is another one of these technologies that's a 25-year overnight sensation, so to speak, in the sense of Walmart pushed RFID in the supply chain quite a bit in the early 2000s. And it really didn't go anywhere until we got to COVID. And then all of a sudden, as we started shipping from store and local delivery and everything else, the use case became very, very apparent. And further, as you saw the rise in theft happening at the stores, that real-time nature of knowing I actually do have this has become all the more critical. And so when you think of that, RFID is one there. And then the computer vision is being added. It's mostly been added as an anti-theft component at self-checkout. That's what people think of mostly. But it's also being used at the shelves and looking at the shelves and optimizing the shelves. And that's everything from computer vision as just simply a picture. There are some solutions where they just take a picture every 8 feet and they upload the pictures to actual, real video that they're either using their CCTV cameras for, or the robots that are going through the store do that. The adoption and the acceptance of the autonomous robots has been greatly enhanced in the last 2 years, with what we've seen at Sam's and other locations where people are just getting used to. I think Schnucks Market with the Cindy Tally was one of the first ones. Yeah. Well, we now have robots as a service that are now being deployed where you don't necessarily need the robot every day, all day, but maybe 3 times a week, you might want to have the robot come through the store. So they just literally bring it in, set it up, and program it, and it just goes through things. So a lot of this has to do with compliance, not only shelf compliance in terms of space planning, but also the fact that particularly in mass merchants and supermarkets, you've got trade dollars that are coming down. If you have an end cap that has one, it's what it's supposed to have. So the ability to monitor those compliance for trade dollars is usually the situation, the difference between being profitable or not profitable for a lot of retailers. And supermarkets, I always laugh. Everybody thinks supermarkets, it's about location, 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 and about where people shop. And it's like, really, yeah, yes and no. But actually, most retailers make their money from the packaged goods companies and the brands that are selling through that, which kind of leads us into this whole retail media networks component of things as well. So when you have that real-time data about inventory, now you can actually plug that into what you're doing with the media networks for what you're pushing at the stores. There are some studies that show, like in fast food, for instance, based on how much you have of any particular menu item, if you just add a little animation, like a little smoke coming off the burger type thing, you can increase the sales of those items by 25%. And so when you start factoring that in with your data being accurate at the store level, those can be incredible top line movers in the profitability.
Where would you say we are so far? I mean, how many retailers are using computer vision?
It's less than 10% overall that are using computer vision.
Okay.
And this is another one of those that gets to be a little controversial in the sense that is the computer vision looking at that person storing their information or their image, or is it just looking for behaviors? How does that work? There are all different methods. Each vendor has their own. Those that focus on Europe, everything's anonymized there, but we're seeing more and more. In fact, one of our next webinars is going to be on the value of facial recognition, and not only for loss prevention, for theft, but also for slip and falls. And what you're realizing is by building this network of data, you actually see these people coming into other stores that are, going on slip and falls, and they're creating fraud. But what's interesting when you use it for loss prevention is when that comes in, it's like, hey, wait, that person's in the database for theft for something else. It's like now we can be proactive to prevent that theft from happening, or we can alert authorities if it was big enough to challenge them as they come in. And that becomes a privacy thing. And the data is incredible, though, when you do it. 74% reduction in your theft rates when you use facial recognition to find the 2 or 3% of the people that are stealing versus the 97% that are not. And that's a cultural thing. In China, it's just over there, it's accepted and it's everywhere. And here in the States, it's accepted or not accepted. Like,
I mean,
I don't care. I'm honest. I don't care.
I think that actors kind of ruin it for everyone. I really don't want to be surveilled while I'm shopping.
Well, let's look at it this way. Another way is red light cameras,
Yeah,
the only people that problem with red light cameras are all of us that run red lights, or speed,
Yes.
And so it's the same there. The only people that really have a problem with facial recognitions are the people that are doing something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I can see both sides for sure, but it is having that data, big impact, but definitely has to have a thoughtful strategy on compliance and purpose and how they're communicating that to customers for sure.
Yeah. And I think the vendors need to do a better job, and the retailers would need to do a better job of when it comes to facial recognition, explaining how the technology actually works. It's just like your phone is not using a picture of your face. It's using measurements that come together that produce that. So where they may have video that stores somebody coming in, and they can pull up that video based on the characteristics of that person. It is not a like they do in the movies where, I got all these faces going, and and that's the one. That's not how this works. That's too process intensive. Right. It works by taking these algorithms and your face is put in and those measurements are done, and they're in a range, and that's what allows it to work. And so it's data, not your actual face.
What does the data show about the business cases? When retailers invest in shelf intelligence, what do they expect to get back? I mean, if you're going in for an initial deployment, what does that ROI calculation look like? What's that?
The return can range everywhere from 3 months up to about 12 to 14 months, depending on the segment and depending on the business model of the vendor that is deploying it. And I think that's been one of the challenges that have held back some of these technologies for a long time. That traditional, hey, you pay for it all up front type of thing, it's held people back. The most ideal aspect of things is, at least in the pilot stages or early stages, hey, I'll pay you as we see results of your solution is what the retailer wants to do. But that typically, when they do see the results coming in, and it's like a revenue share based on the results is how it's paid for, they quickly move to, no, if it's working really good, they change that very, very quickly to, hey, I'll just pay the license fee now and cap that, because when the technology really, really works, it's a win-win for everybody. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it with these technologies. RFID is, other than handheld devices for managers, we've never seen a technology with a stronger alignment with the people that are actually winning in their sales growth at greater than 10%. So we define winners as those who increase their sales by 10% a year or their profits 10% a year. And RFID, the sales winners are over 6.5 times more likely to be using RFID technology. Computer vision is another one of those. It's a little less. It's in the 2 to 3 times range, but still extremely strong results when that's done. But like I said, you can't just put these technologies in by themselves. You have to have the network. You have to have the edge devices to process that. So for instance, like RFID, you don't care other than the tag is still there. You don't need to process that. Other than the tag is still there, you need to process what's moved. And if that's moved, where has it moved to? So how do you sort through a read that has 10,000 items in it, and you only care about the 50 that have moved? Where does that processing get done? And does it get done in the device? Does it get done in the access point? Does it get done at an edge server? Every retailer looks at that differently. And that is a calculation that you have to take into consideration. As well, would you want just a handheld where somebody has to be consistent in what they're doing? The first time they do a really great job, and the second time they're just kind of doing one of these, just keep kind of giving it away? Or do you want to have perpetual RFID? We've done some case studies where it's less than 3 months, the perpetual RFID return, because you know exactly where the product is in the store, and thus you saved all that labor in finding it, where it's not good enough that you knew where it was Sunday. Do you know where it is right now? Then you can find, somebody put it back on the wrong rack. Then in that environment. So every use case is different. Every retailer is different, and you've got to work through those calculations. But the data for all of these is extremely strong. And even shelf labels now with the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. We can get the merchandise, we can't get the merchandise. There's a blockage there. There's a drought in the Panama Canal. So there's the Strait of Hormuz. You've got all of these different things that are at play, and the ability to change those prices in real time to take advantage of that. And I want to say real time, once again, overnight, to take advantage of what's going on is a big, big deal.
Yeah. Do you have a sense from the data, like what are people expecting? What are their top expectations? Are they trying to see improvements in customer satisfaction? Is it just the inventory accuracy? Are they looking for a higher revenue? All of the above?
Yeah. That customer satisfaction is always going to be number one. Just that the fact that they can have on the shelf what the customer wants to buy when they want to buy it. That's number one, because literally that is the single biggest criteria that retailers get measured on. Let's face it, it's too easy to buy online now. You go to stores because you expect that store to have what you want to buy when you go there. And we've done some research with Amazon Prime members who actually go to physical stores to shop. And so basically, I think it was at the time, 74% of US households had Amazon Prime at the time, but that's over 90% of those with incomes over $100,000. And those people go to stores because they expect you to have it. And if you don't, they just whip out the phone and buy it with express delivery there. And they often don't look at that retailer again for that item. And that becomes a death spiral if you don't have it. So that customer satisfaction piece is critical. So that's number one. But it's also lowering the labor cost, lowering the actual cost of operations. How much are you wasting in safety stock because you don't know what's on the shelves? I mean, my joke has always been for people, if it says limited supply on the website, don't even bother going to the store because they don't know.
Right.
They just literally do not know
that's
what it
code
is.
word for we have no idea.
Yeah. And the chances there. But even then, I was at a home improvement retailer and we had our roof repaired and we've got dogs and they try to get all the nails up, but I wanted to buy one of those magnetic sweepers to get all the nails up. It said they had 15 in stock. I go there's none on the shelf. And the guy goes, they're here somewhere. They're here somewhere. They're up on a shelf somewhere. And he didn't have the ability to like Scanned It has got an image, the image thing that you just hold it up and it just lights up and it says it's that one right over there. Didn't have the ability to do it. So they're in stocks at 15. I left without it. Because
I would have stood there and be like, I'll wait.
Yeah, I went to the other competitor.
Yeah.
It sounds like a training moment.
Yeah. Or in laptops. I mean, my goodness, where I'm spending $2,000 and it says it's in stock and the associate can't find it.
Yep.
And you spent 15, 20 minutes to do that. And you whip out the phone and says, I'm not dealing with this. I'm just going to order it where I know I can get it delivered. So it's an existential threat to not have accurate inventory there, but just the cost at each one of these interactions. I spent 15 minutes going around for something that was like a $20 item.
Right.
That around the store, and he never did find it. And so those are the challenges that this really starts to address. But at the end of the day, it's lowering costs and it's better information. And then more and more importantly, particularly in the branded merchandise, is that shelf intelligence to be able to sell that data back to the brands. Because that's one of the things that your big brands that are selling stuff to retailers, they generally do not have that intelligence at the shelf level.
Yeah.
At the store level. And understand, hey, our sales are down. Well, are your sales down because it's not being presented properly? Is the sales down because you don't have it? What are the sales down? And this gives them that ability to sell that data back to those brands.
I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan and frustrated for buy online and pick up in store or pick out online and have a basket ready for me when I come into the store and schedule that, because I'm getting very frustrated shopping online. It's great to be able to make one trip a week into the city to go and make a return of like all this random stuff that I was like did not like from Amazon. But I'm being disappointed more by low quality products that maybe were a little bit overpriced, right? Or I thought it was a really good deal and it was like too good to be true a deal. And now I'm finding that like, I just want to go ahead and set up that day when I'm going into the city and just hit 4 stores to run those errands. But I want my basket waiting for me. These are the things I want. I don't care where you get them. Just get them there by like Thursday and I'll be in there like day after tomorrow. And then I'll go through my basket and decide like what I want and what I don't want. And I feel like that would just be such a service to the in-store associates, because otherwise I'm just like asking them to hang out with me for 20 minutes to go look and find things while I have like the web browser up, because I don't know what this stuff is called. I'm like, I thought this was cute and this was cute and this was cute. And they're like, oh, I don't have this. Oh, I don't have this. I'm like, why can't we just have that visibility, right? And I guess it all kind of comes back down to this. Solving this problem so that we can solve a completely different problem.
The issue that you're facing or explaining there is why do airlines oversell their seats?
I have no clue. Why?
Well, they do it because people don't show up, or people don't make the connection.
Show up for a flight. I never have I.
All the time.
It happens
all the time. And it's more that somebody didn't make the connection, so they're not on the flight. So they oversell it. And that's the issue. The problem with to do what you do now, so the typical female shopper right now buying clothes online will buy 3 and return 2 because of the sizing issues and aspirational sizes and one, right, and you don't know what it is. And now some of the retailers are pushing back on that. If you wanted to do that at the store level, now they've actually held inventory that they could sell for you to show up. And if you don't show up, they've just taken inventory out of sales process for that. So it gets very, very difficult, particularly for clothing, when you only have so many of a particular size or particular color to be able to do that. There are these true fit technologies now that are in play that have greatly reduced returns as a result of that. But we're still sitting at about 90% returns for e-commerce on women's dresses. It's incredible.
We have a vanity sizing issue in the United States.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have no business being a size extra small at Free People when I have other things from 2 years ago, same shirt, that's a medium, and now I'm an extra small. It's not my fault, and I shouldn't be punished. That's their fault.
And that's the whole thing in fashion in particular. We have done that to the industry. It's just the same way we didn't, you could look at it in terms of offshoring our manufacturing. We've done this ourselves. We created this problem that we're dealing with today. And with the rise of e-commerce, this returns issue, we caused the problem by aspirational sizing.
Yeah.
That there's no consistency whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's some wisdom in the guys like Steve Jobs that just would always wear the black turtleneck and blue jeans. That's all they had. That's all they got. Because they never had to worry. They never had to worry. They just get it. This is what I'm wearing every single day. I'm not using any brain power on that.
They wasn't have to worry that much in the first place. A 34 is a 34, a 32 is a 32, a 52 is a 52, or a 42 is a 42. You guys' sizing has been so consistent over 100 years. I know an 88-year-old are still the exact same size.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. But I mean, that's the big issue with fashion. The issue with other items, it's just a plain velocity thing. The stat that blew my mind, and I was at a grocery event when I heard this, it's just 80% of the SKUs in a grocery store sell less than one a week.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's interesting.
And it was mind-blowing to learn that. And so when you go to shelf intelligence, you literally go on, okay, which of these things do we need to keep on the shelves?
Right.
Which of these things, you need to have this on the shelf. We don't sell it very often, but when we do, that person's spending $300 because they're buying this. You've got to work through all of that data. But because at the same time, you've got this incredible increase with buy on store, pick up in store, click and collect for groceries. You need space for that.
Yeah.
But you can create that space by taking some items off the shelves. For people that travel internationally, when you see a U.S. supermarket, you're just like dumbfounded by the number of brands and the number of choices per category that are literally on the shelves. There's so much there. So you've got this remodeling and these store format changes that are occurring rapidly. And these technologies we're talking about, shelf intelligence, is enabling some of those changes to occur because that intelligence is there on which items you really need to have in stock, which items can you still have, but they're not on display. They're in back and they're in a format that if somebody asks for it, you could pull it from the back or it could be part of commerce order there. But I think gone are the days where I think it used to be the joke when I was at NCR that Meijer stores had to have in stock what Mrs. Wexner had on her, Les Wexner's mom had on her shopping list. Whatever she bought, they could never run out of. Every item on the shopping.
They should take, the neighborhood should just kind of take all of our grocery lists, right? Like when I want to make cookies, I want you to have flour, but I do not keep flour in my house because I barely ever use it. I just buy it, the cookies, and throw the rest away. Sorry.
But that's, a big part of, for me, that I find always an interesting thing that I would think shelf intelligence can create an edge here is that with grocery, because of what you just said, right? If 80% of the items don't sell more than one a week, I mean, the first thought that occurs to me is there's a lot of specialty items in most supermarkets, which are things on the shelf that, and I buy a lot of these specialty things, but when I do, they're usually the kind of thing that whether it's a liquid in a jar or something that comes in a tub or a container, it lasts a long time. Most of these are things that you'd never need to buy on a weekly basis. You maybe are buying one a month. Or maybe even less frequently. So, but you're right that when I do need it, I expect that there's going to be one there on the shelf, right?
Right.
But I don't need to buy it all the time.
Vanilla extract.
Yeah, that's a good example.
You expect them to have it. Right. They may not have
all
10 of them.
Ingredients should be in stock.
Yeah.
They may not need 10 different varieties of the vanilla extract.
Right.
But on the front-facing piece of that, it frees up. Hey, I've got a shelf now where I can put the whole orders in the back there, or I can do these micro fulfillment centers, which are robotic fulfillment centers in the back that can manage those orders. And we're seeing that more and more often.
Yeah, I'm always
amazed with the rise of drone delivery too. You got to have a place to stage those things and stuff. I mean, even Sam came out with an announcement this week saying they have delivery in less than an hour.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what are you bringing? You for a whole pickup truck delivered to your house in less than an hour now.
Yeah, that's impressive. But there are a lot of these things where I always think, especially with the MFC ID, I mean, all these items that I buy that infrequently at a grocery store, I know ahead of time when I'm going to get them. So why isn't there an ability with it, whoever my favorite grocery store is, that I should be able to say, I'm going to go shopping, but here's my list of 10 things that I know are the ones that are oddballs. Just have them ready in a pickup area in the store when I get there if I send it ahead, right? Just those 10. I'll still go pick all the produce and everything else. Don't worry about that. But all these shelf items that I buy once in a blue moon, I need to know that it's there. So why can't I just send those items ahead and they're staged and ready for me? They don't even have to be out on a shelf, right? There can be a robot picking them in a back room somewhere that's just pre-bagged and ready for me to pick up to take to a checkout, along with all the other things in my cart.
Or just pulling like your top 500 customers that shop on the most frequently and putting that as the part of the list, that these items must stay in stock because our customers come in getting them.
Yeah, because they're the most common.
Because they're kind of the most common. Having a product sell less than 80% sell less than once a week. To me, that means our assortment's too big. Our assortment is off. We are so missing the mark. That's what it would read to me, not coming from grocery, that the whole thing needs to be reassorted, but understanding that data and understanding what that data says. I mean, I have to say, I would have never guessed that.
I think
oh my gosh, you're all fired.
Yeah, I'm
feeling.
Another technology that plays in here is computer-aided ordering. And when you're able to do that and able to enforce that across things like vendor managed inventory, that is a big issue when it comes to groceries. So for instance, your Coke and Pepsi, they're the ones that are handling the inventory when it comes to those products. Mondelez handling their stuff, ice cream vendors, et cetera, handling their stuff. It's traditionally been keep the shelves full regardless of whether or not you have what's in stock. You just move. Hey, if it's ice cream and we're out of vanilla and I'm supposed to have 5 lanes of vanilla and instead I fill it in with strawberry and make it look full, but I don't have enough vanilla, all of a sudden I start losing sales. And because the vendor's managing that and the retailer doesn't know, they're losing sales as a result of it. And by forcing the computer-aided inventory and the space planning compliance now to those vendor managed inventories, they're seeing 20% increase in profitability in those categories because the right product is in the right shelf, or if they don't have it, they don't have it. So they're ordering the right amount. All of that starts to flow. And this is the crazy part, because Casey, if you're coming from the fashion side, in the grocery side, the goal is to sell through their inventory 4 times before they got to pay for it. Okay, so they want to sell 4 weeks of inventory of that item before they pay for the first week, before the first week inventory that they've got to pay for it. That's how tight the margins are. And when you have a vendor managed inventory situation, that becomes a big problem if they're not being held to the compliance.
Things.
It's all about inventory control, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The customer's entire perception is whether or not you have things in stock.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not like the audience as much, but they always have it. They may like another store because the people are nicer, but this one always has what I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the most important factor.
At the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's number one.
Yeah.
Wants to keep shopping.
Yeah.
It's so funny. We have this butter that I don't know, everybody I know, like we all eat the same butter. And it's only at Whole Foods. It's at Whole Foods. I feel like somebody just never marked it up, or it's like been priced wrong for 10 years, but it's limit 4 per customer. And so we all know the delivery schedule at which Whole Foods on when it's restocked. So we can all go get our 4 cubes of like butter.
Are you calling each other going, hey, are you
Dan,
hey, can you pick me up a couple extra?
Yeah. I mean, one of my friends, every time she comes over, she brings me 4 bricks of butter because he lives right next to one of the Whole Foods.
Wow.
Like super random, but like as customers, like sometimes like we know where inventory is. We know the day that it gets filled. I'm only allowed to have 4. Like we've got a little call tree going, oh, there's some butter over here. Do you want me to pick you up like 4 bricks or 2? I'll share. Yeah. I don't need butter right now, but it's here. So does anybody else need butter?
I'm going to have to get with you offline on this butter here, you know.
You're missing out.
I'm not in this club.
Yeah, you're not in the inner butter circle.
But yeah, like, come on, just like text message us.
I need more butter.
So Greg, with this, everything we've talked about here on shelf intelligence, what's the single most important decision you would say to a retail CIO that they need to make this year to go from, let's say, pilot to scale with shelf intelligence?
Yeah, I think you've got to determine your format. I can't say one technology in and of itself is your solution. The one that crosses everything is your network there, and then Edge would be next. And then you can decide whether it's cameras, whether it's RFID, whether it's shelf labels. For those, the order in which I would do them for most is likely shelf labels first, and then RFID second, computer vision third. And that's just simply because of the returns that you get from that. Whereas the shelf labels, the fact that you now know what your upcoming costs are going to be, it's sort of like gas prices. You can change those prices very quickly because your input costs are there because you get tariffs or whatever. That's too compelling to not change. That's a drop right to the bottom line in terms of that pricing. And then I would say RFID, because the RFID is more consistent across more categories that you have than the computer vision. So where RFID can see things that are stacked on top of each other there, it can be used as a checkout technology. It can be used to find where in a store something is. Computer vision can do great when it's looking at theft or when it's looking at the front of shelves to see what's in stock or not. It doesn't do well for the things that are behind the things that are front facing on the shelf. So you don't get as accurate of an inventory when you do it that way. The real solution is really a combination of the two for most places. And some are using weighted shelves and others to do things. But that would be the order of there'd be the network, the processing, and then I would say for most it's going to be the shelf labels, RFID, that computer vision last, unless you're in a really high theft environment where the facial recognition type of piece is so critical. I mean, we know in the height of the theft that was happening in San Francisco, I know of a drugstore that was losing 10% of same store sales after spending 40 times their national average on physical guards.
Wow.
Because of the laws. In that case, theft is an existential threat to overall survival for the company, and they pulled out. They just pulled out of the region. They can't afford to have stores here.
Yeah.
And so that would be an extenuating circumstance where they would put that over another technology. But generally, if you're talking about a grocery store type of environment, you're usually looking at shelf labels first because that has a direct labor component savings or a labor reutilization area of not your labor instead of changing prices, which you think about it, how much value is there in changing the price labels, somebody physically doing that compared to doing a profit center, like they're making more prepared foods and using that labor in that way, or just making sure the stuff is on the shelf in the first place.
Right.
That is far more valuable use of human labor than it is changing the price tags per se. It also automatically, because the price is coming from the same database that's ringing up at the front, the price that's on the shelf matches the price that's going to ring up on the scanner. Whereas when you're physically putting shelf tags on there, you're never quite sure. I think so. There's a lot of losses that occurred because the prices were wrong, or we didn't get around to put the shelf tags on. That sort of thing. So that's a big one. But RFID, because of just the rise in these multi-channel sales that are occurring, and just knowing you have the product at the store level. So we're seeing overall 89% of all orders are fulfilled from a store. And so that RFID is really helpful. And then that works all the way through the supply chain. You can use it for tracking, traceability, all those sort of things.
Okay, I think my most interesting bit, there are lots of great points there. But I think it's most interesting that you put upgrading the network first so that you can actually handle all of these things.
Right.
Because it's been a while since we've seen so much data intensive technology going into the store that needs to be supported. So that's an excellent point.
Right. Well, I mean, we're seeing it in AI tools right now where vendors are so compute limited that they're slowing down. Just can't use their models now, even though everybody wants to use it. It's the same thing happening with the network at the stores. You start putting all of these different touch points in there, and the network simply can't handle it. And that all affects customer experience, number one, and then what associates think of working there and the tools that you can give them. So.
Yep, that's so true. Greg, thank you for joining us today and kicking off the series with this incredible topic around shelf intelligence. I think we have a few hints in there on what's to come in the next two parts of the series. I think we've got some things coming up on store associate tools and supply chain and returns, and we kind of touched on all of those. So looking forward to those coming up.
Yep, thank you.
Greg, as we wrap up part one, if anyone would like to follow up with you to dig deeper with IHL's help, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, so the easiest way is on our website, ihlservices.com, and just say contact us, or you can find me at Greg Buzek on LinkedIn, at Greg Buzek, and find me there.
Great. And you guys, if you're not already following Greg, you need to be following Greg on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Again, thanks, Greg. We'll be looking forward to part two on in-store associate tools. So, Ricardo, I'd say this episode is a wrap. Loved this episode? Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or GoodPods. And if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe before you go. I'm Casey Golden.
Follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and subscribe to our Substack for highlights and bonus content. For transcripts and guest info, visit retailrazor.com. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us on the Retail Razor Data Blades, part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network.
Until next time, stay sharp, be data-driven, and harness AI. This is the Retail Razor Data Blades.